A tense encounter erupts when Karen, overwhelmed by fear for her hospitalized mother, lashes out and slaps Officer Darius, a calm and patient security guard. Consumed by guilt, she gradually forms an unexpected bond with him as he supports her through rising medical concerns, including alarming news about her kidneys. As Karen confronts her own flaws, buried truths about her past and her health begin resurfacing. Mysterious hints about Darius's own history and a life-altering act of compassion tighten the emotional thread between them, pushing Karen toward a revelation that will challenge everything she believes about herself and him. The night hummed with the low fluorescent buzz of the hospital corridor, a sound so constant it felt like the building itself was breathing. In that sterile glow, a lone security camera blinked, recording everything and understanding nothing. Moments before the chaos, the hallway was calm, eerily calm, like the hush before a storm that no one believes will break. But storms don't ask permission. They just arrive, unapologetically. Karen Whitlow's heels struck the linoleum with a frantic, uneven rhythm, the kind born not of urgency but entitlement sharpened by fear. Her face was tight, lips pinched, anger boiling beneath the surface as she marched toward the nurses' station, scattering a pair of interns like startled birds. She wasn't here for clarity. She was here for control. Behind the counter, the night shift nurse tried to explain the visitation rules again, her voice calm, restrained, practiced. Karen didn't hear a word. She only heard the pounding of her own indignation, the roar of her own narrative drowning out reality. Her mother was inside that room, recovering from an emergency procedure, and Karen had decided the world owed her unrestricted access. That was when Officer Darius Cole stepped forward. He moved with quiet authority, the kind that doesn't need volume or threat. His uniform was crisp, posture steady, eyes patient. The badge on his chest caught the fluorescent light, but it was his presence, solid, composed, that grounded the moment. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I need you to lower your voice. The staff is trying to help." Karen whipped toward him, her expression sharpening like glass. "Don't tell me what to do," she snapped, her voice slicing through the corridor. "My mother could be dying, and you're worried about my volume?" Darius didn't react. He had learned long ago that some people lash outward when they're collapsing inward. His calm wasn't just training, it was choice. He repeated, still soft, "Ma'am, please work with us. You'll be allowed in soon." But entitlement doesn't negotiate. With one swift, reckless motion, Karen's hand snapped across his face. The slap cracked through the hallway like a gunshot. The interns froze. The nurse gasped. For a heartbeat, even the buzzing lights felt silent. Darius didn't move. His cheek reddened, but his expression didn't change. No anger. No retaliation. Just a quiet, steady breath that held something softer than restraint, something like sorrow. Karen's chest heaved, realizing too late the line she had crossed. You provoked me," she stammered, her voice on the verge of trembling. But the words landed hollow even in her own ears. The charge nurse signaled for assistance. 2 additional security officers approached, but Darius raised a single hand, stopping them. "It's fine," he said. "She's upset. Let's de-escalate." He wasn't defending her. He was protecting the moment from spiraling into something worse, shielding everyone, including her, from the consequences of her own actions. Karen's breathing slowed, but shame curled in her stomach like smoke. She opened her mouth to speak, to walk back the moment, but no words came. Instead, she turned away, folding her arms tightly as if holding herself together by force alone. The medical staff resumed their work, though the air remained cracked with tension. A janitor pushed a cart past them, pretending not to have seen what everyone had seen. A distant monitor beeped in uneven rhythm, echoing the corridor's unsettled pulse. Darius stepped back to his post beside the patient room doors. His cheek still flushed, but he made no move to touch it. He simply stood, breathing slowly, the way a person does when they've had practice absorbing the weight of other people's storms. Karen paced. She muttered to herself. She crafted excuses that sounded weaker each time they looped through her mind. Underneath the anger, fear gnawed, fear of losing her mother, fear of losing control, fear of the mirror she had just forced herself to look into. A doctor emerged at last, clipboard in hand, exhaustion shadowing his eyes. "Ms. Whitlow?" he asked. Karen nearly leapt toward him. "Your mother is stable. The surgery was successful. She'll need rest." Relief washed over her, but did nothing to soften the memory of the slap still echoing in the hallway. She glanced toward Darius, who gave her a single nod, not of forgiveness, not of approval, but of acknowledgement. A silent offering. Let this moment teach you something. But the lesson would come later. For now, Karen stepped into her mother's dim hospital room, her guilt trailing behind her like a shadow stretched too long. Machines hummed softly. Her mother slept peacefully, unaware of the chaos outside. Karen sank into the chair beside the bed, her hands trembling. She stared at them, at the fingers that had struck a man who had shown her nothing but patience. She whispered, "What is wrong with me?" The room didn't answer. Yet somewhere deep beneath the guilt, beneath the anger, beneath the layers she had spent years building, something began to shift. Something small, something uncomfortable, something necessary. She didn't know yet that this night, this one impulsive act, would unravel her understanding of the world. She didn't know that the man she struck carried a truth about her life that she had never imagined. She didn't know that fate had already bound them in a story larger than both of them. The slap was only the spark. The revelation was coming, slow and unstoppable, like dawn pressing against the horizon. And when it arrived, nothing, not her pride, not her assumptions, not her carefully built identity, would remain untouched. The truth would come for her with the softness of mercy and the force of consequence. In the quiet room, Karen closed her eyes, unaware that the greatest debt of her life had already been paid. And the man she had struck was the one who had paid it. She simply didn't know. The morning crept into the hospital like a slow confession, filtering through the blinds in pale, reluctant beams. Karen hadn't slept. Her mother's room had become a cocoon of silence, broken only by the soft hiss of oxygen and the rhythmic whisper of machines that didn't care about human shame or human pride. Karen sat rigid in the bedside chair, her thoughts looping back to the crack of her hand striking Officer Darius Cole. Every time the memory replayed, it stung sharper, like a wound rubbing against salt. She tried to justify it, fear, stress, frustration, but the excuses dissolved as quickly as she formed them. The truth was simpler, uglier. She'd lost control, and she'd chosen the easiest target in the room, the man who'd stood still and calm while her world spiraled. Guilt moved through her like a fever. By the time her mother stirred awake, blinking slowly against the light, Karen forced her face into something resembling composure. "Hey, Mom," she whispered, leaning forward. "You're okay. You made it through the surgery." Her mother's voice was barely audible. "You look terrible, sweetheart." Karen attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Didn't sleep much." Her mother studied her with a weak but perceptive gaze. "What happened?" Karen hesitated. The truth hovered at the back of her throat, heavy and shameful. But she shook her head. "Nothing. Just long night." Her mother didn't push. She never pushed. Instead, she closed her eyes again, drifting back into the fog of medications and healing. Karen sat back, exhaling shakily. If her mother ever discovered what she'd done, the disappointment alone might crush her. When a nurse entered to check vitals, Karen slipped out of the room. The hallway still carried the phantom tension of last night, though the staff moved with their usual brisk, purposeful cadence. Karen's gaze drifted to the security desk near the double doors, and there he was. Officer Darius Cole stood beside the new shift officer, his uniform crisp, his posture as steady as the night before. His cheek no longer bore the red imprint of her slap, but the memory lived vividly in her mind. She swallowed hard, her pulse skittering. She wanted to apologize, but her legs felt rooted to the floor. He glanced in her direction. She looked away too quickly. Coward, she thought bitterly. Instead of approaching, she drifted toward the hospital cafeteria, as if coffee could wash away humiliation. The cafeteria was mostly empty, a few nurses murmuring over scrambled eggs, a lone doctor hunched over a chart, exhaustion etched into his posture. Karen bought a coffee she didn't want and sat near the window, staring at the steaming cup like it held answers. What kind of person hits a man just doing his job? What kind of person lets fear mutate into cruelty? The questions churned, relentless. Across the room, an elderly woman in a wheelchair was struggling to adjust her tray, hands trembling. Before Karen could rise to help, Officer Darius appeared beside the woman, moving with quiet grace. She hadn't even noticed him enter the room. He bent slightly, adjusting the tray with a warm smile, speaking softly. The woman's face eased with gratitude. Karen watched him, feeling the sting of her own selfishness sharpen. This was the man she slapped. A man who moved through the world with patience she couldn't fathom. He glanced toward her again, briefly, before returning his attention to the elderly woman. It wasn't a hostile look, not even cautious. It was simply an acknowledgement, a nod from someone who refused to let anger dictate his humanity. Karen stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. She made it 3 steps toward him before her courage evaporated. Instead, she veered toward a vending machine and pretended to study the snack options. Shame clawed up her neck. Pathetic. Later that afternoon, while her mother slept deeply, Karen wandered outside the hospital to breathe air that wasn't recycled through vents. She leaned against the cold metal railing, watching ambulances drift in and out. The world outside seemed indifferent to her inner chaos. Cars passed, lives unfolded, and Karen felt small, like a single grain in a vast, uncaring desert. She didn't hear Darius approach until he spoke. "Ms. Whitlow." She stiffened, turning slowly. He stood a few feet away, not too close, not imposing. His hands rested calmly at his sides, his expression unreadable. The sun cast a muted glow on his uniform, softening the edges of his stature. Her throat tightened. "Officer Cole," she said, the words scraping out. He nodded. "Just wanted to check in. How's your mother doing?" Karen blinked, thrown by the gentleness in his tone. "She's better. Thank you for asking." Her voice wavered. She swallowed hard. "Listen, about last night." "You were under a lot of stress," he said, not unkindly. "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "That's not an excuse. What I did was unacceptable. Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. Truly." The silence that followed seemed to stretch across the parking lot. Darius studied her for a long moment, his expression steady, searching, not for excuses, but for sincerity. She let him find it. At last he said quietly, "Thank you. I appreciate the apology." Something warm pressed behind her eyes. She hadn't expected forgiveness offered so simply, without conditions. Darius shifted his weight. Hospitals bring out the worst in people sometimes. Fear does that. Karen nodded, staring at the ground. "Doesn't make it right." "No," he agreed. "But it means you can learn from it." She looked up, surprised by the softness in his voice. He wasn't lecturing her. He wasn't belittling her. He was offering something she hadn't earned, grace. "I'm trying," she whispered. "That's all anyone can ask." He gave her a small nod, then stepped back. "If you need anything while you're here, security, directions, someone to help you navigate all this, don't hesitate." "Thank you," she murmured, the words carrying more weight than he knew. He walked away, returning to the hospital doors with steady strides. Karen watched him disappear inside, a strange ache blooming in her chest, not romantic, not infatuated, but something softer, something human. Respect. Recognition. Humility. She didn't know the tangled history that tied their lives. She didn't know the depth of his connection to her story. She didn't know that her apology, earnest as it was, would soon pale in comparison to the gratitude she would owe him. For now, she only knew this. She had struck the wrong man. And fate was not done with her yet. The days that followed unfolded with a quiet, suspended tension, like the slow tightening of a thread that had not yet revealed what it was pulling toward. Karen moved through the hospital with a softened, cautious presence, the remnants of shame lingering behind every step she took. She visited her mother dutifully, spoke to the nurses politely, and never raised her voice. Yet beneath her forced calmness, something deeper churned, an unease she couldn't name, a sense that the world was shifting beneath her feet in ways she did not understand. Her mother was recovering well, the surgeons pleased with her progress. But every time Karen looked at her lying in bed, frail yet resilient, she felt a twist of fear inside her chest. Fear of losing her. Fear of failing her. Fear of being exposed as someone she didn't want to be. And then, there were the dreams. They began the second night after her apology to Officer Cole. Dreams of a dim hospital room, but not this one, another corridor, another hallway, another bed. She stood in a room where machines beeped in slow, steady rhythm, and a doctor spoke quietly over her shoulder. She couldn't make out the words, but she could feel something grave in the air. A signature. Papers. A weight of choice. In the dream, she reached for a pen, but the pen dissolved in her fingers, turning to black ink that seeped into her skin like a stain she couldn't scrub away. She awoke each time with her heart pounding, sweat dampening her back, the echoes of something she had forgotten pressing against her chest. By the fourth day, she found herself seeking moments of silence outside, the hospital walls beginning to feel too tight, too familiar. The autumn air was crisp, leaves skittering across the pavement like restless thoughts. She lingered by the railing again, wrapping her arms around herself for warmth instead of comfort. She had grown used to seeing Darius over the past few days. His steady presence at security checkpoints, his quiet nods, the calm way he carried himself. She wouldn't call it friendship. But something in the atmosphere between them had changed. There was understanding now. Mutual respect. A shared awareness of the fragility of the human condition. That afternoon, she saw him standing near the ambulance bay, speaking to a paramedic. His posture was alert but relaxed, the ease of someone used to constant crisis. She watched him for a moment, unsure if she should approach. She wasn't even sure why she wanted to. Maybe to say thank you again. Maybe to ask how someone learned to hold so much patience in their hands without letting it slip. Maybe just to be near something steady. Before she could decide, he turned and saw her. His expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of recognition, a silent invitation. She walked toward him. "Everything okay?" he asked when she reached him. She nodded. "Yeah. Just getting some air." "That's good," he said. "People forget to breathe in places like this." She gave a faint smile. "You seem to handle it pretty well." His eyes drifted briefly to the sky. "I've had practice." Something in the way he said it, soft, layered with history, piqued her curiosity. She wanted to ask. But before she could, a faint commotion rose from the entrance behind them. A nurse hurried toward the doors, her expression tight with urgency. "Officer Cole," she called. Darius was already moving. Karen stepped aside as he strode past her, instinct kicking into gear. She followed at a distance, curiosity knotting with concern. Inside the lobby, a young man was pacing, his hands shaking violently. His words spilled out in frantic stammers. "She won't wake up, I can't, she's not responding, please, someone help her." The nurse tried to calm him, but fear can turn words into static. Darius approached steadily. "Sir," he said, voice firm but kind, "take a breath. What's going on?" "My sister, she's in the car, she collapsed. Please, please." Darius didn't waste a second. He signaled to a nearby staff member, and together they rushed toward the parking lot. Karen remained in the doorway, heart pounding as she watched them pull a limp teenage girl from the back seat of a sedan. The girl's skin was chalky, lips tinged blue. A terrifying stillness wrapped around her. The medical team surged forward, lifting the girl onto a stretcher, rushing her through the automatic doors. The brother sobbed, stumbling after them. Darius stayed behind momentarily, ensuring the area was clear, directing people away, preventing panic from spreading. And then Karen saw something subtle but profound. He took a slow breath, closing his eyes for a single heartbeat. A private moment of prayer, of centering, of worn familiarity with tragedy. When he opened his eyes, the composure returned, but Karen had seen beneath the surface. She had glimpsed the weight he carried quietly, the kind of emotional gravity built from years of witnessing the worst moments of people's lives. "He holds everyone else's pain," she whispered without meaning to. He walked back toward her, the slightest strain in his posture. She stepped forward. "Is she going to be okay?" "Hard to know yet," he said. "They'll do everything they can." Karen hesitated, then spoke gently. "You deal with things like this every day?" He nodded. "Hospital duty isn't like patrol. You don't see crime as much. You see fear, loss, families breaking, families healing. You see people at their most fragile." "Doesn't it get to you?" she asked. A faint smile ghosted across his face. "Of course it does. You just learn how to hold it without letting it crush you." His words struck her, resonating in a place she'd been trying hard to ignore. She looked down at her hands. I wish I'd known how to do that, she said quietly. When I slapped you, I think I was trying to crush someone else so I didn't have to feel crushed myself. Darius didn't respond immediately. His silence wasn't judgment, it was understanding. Finally, he said, "Growth isn't comfortable. But you're doing it." Her chest tightened. "It feels like I'm unraveling." "Maybe that's what you need," he said softly. "Sometimes unraveling is the first step toward rebuilding." His words hung between them, carried by the breeze. Before she could reply, her phone buzzed. A call from an unknown number. She ignored it. Then again. Persistent. She answered hesitantly. "Ms. Whitlow," a calm male voice said. "This is Dr. Hamill. We have the results from your follow-up labs." She frowned. "My labs?" "Yes. From last week. You weren't showing symptoms, but your primary doctor requested additional analysis due to the markers we found." Karen felt a cold thread of dread slip down her spine. "Markers for what?" There was a pause. "Kidney complications," he said. "We need you to come in." The breath left her body. Unseen, unheard, something enormous had just shifted beneath her life. And the ground was beginning to crack. The world tilted around her, not in a dramatic collapse but in a slow, sickening sway, as though the earth itself had taken one shallow breath too many. Karen stared at the phone, its screen still glowing against her trembling hand. Kidney complications. The words pulsed like a second heartbeat in her ears. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "Complications? I don't understand. I feel fine." "Symptoms often come late," Dr. Hamill replied gently. "We don't want to alarm you, but your creatinine levels are elevated. We need further imaging. Preferably today." Her mouth went dry. "Today?" "Yes. If possible." She agreed with a thin whisper, ended the call, and lowered the phone slowly, as though it weighed far more than it should. The parking lot suddenly felt too open, too bright, the air too sharp in her lungs. She sensed rather than saw Darius watching her. "Everything okay?" he asked. She shook her head, but words caught behind her teeth. It took her a moment to force them out. "I need to go for tests. Something's wrong with my kidneys." His brow tightened, not with alarm but with the anchoring calm she'd begun to recognize in him. "Do you need someone to walk you in?" The question cracked something inside her, not because she needed help physically, but because she needed steadiness, and he offered it without hesitation or judgment. She nodded. They walked side by side through the automatic doors, the hum of fluorescent lights greeting them like an unwelcome reminder of how fragile bodies truly were. As they approached the imaging department, Karen's thoughts blurred into a mixture of fear and confusion. She tried to piece together what this meant. She tried to remember her medical history. Her family's. Nothing made sense. When they reached the waiting area, she turned to him. "You don't have to stay." "I know," he said. "But I'm here." The simplicity of the statement struck deeper than any elaborate reassurance could have. She found herself sinking into the chair, her breath hitching. Darius remained standing for a moment before sitting beside her, hands resting calmly on his knees. A nurse called her name. The next hour unfolded in a haze. Blood draws, scans, and the rhythmic hum of medical machinery tracing quiet truths her body had kept hidden. When it was over, she returned to the waiting area, feeling hollowed out. Darius rose when he saw her, studying her face. "You holding up?" "I don't know," she whispered. Before he could respond, Dr. Hamill appeared, clipboard tucked under his arm. His expression was professional but gentle, the kind used by doctors who have learned the art of delivering difficult news without letting it break the receiver. "Ms. Whitlow," he said, "let's talk." She followed him to a small consultation room, Darius lingering in the doorway until she gave him a faint nod. She wanted him there. She didn't want to face whatever truth waited for her alone. "The doctor Saturday, your scans show reduced kidney function," he began carefully. "It appears to be progressing faster than we'd like. Have you noticed any fatigue? Swelling? Changes in appetite?" She shook her head numbly. "No. None." "That can happen," he said. "Sometimes the body compensates until it can't anymore." Karen pressed a hand to her forehead. "So what does this mean?" What do I have to do? For now, more tests, he said. But I want to be transparent. If the decline continues, you may eventually need long-term management. Possibly even a transplant, depending on how things progress. Her breath caught. A transplant. Darius shifted, barely visible from the corner of her eye, but she felt the subtle shift of the air around him. It's early, the doctor said. We're not there yet. But I don't want you blindsided. We'll monitor you closely. Karen nodded, her chest constricting. After a few more questions and instructions, the doctor excused himself, leaving her alone with the tremors of a reality she hadn't been prepared to face. She stared at the tabletop, voice barely audible. A transplant? How can that even be real? Darius sat beside her again, his presence a steady weight. You don't have to panic yet. It's not definite. But it could be, she whispered. And what if I can't find a donor? What if? He placed a hand on the table, not touching her, but close enough to ground her. One step at a time. She swallowed, but the dread wouldn't loosen. She suddenly felt like a child again, lost in a storm she didn't understand. Tears prickled her eyes. I'm scared. He nodded once. Anyone would be. She wiped her face quickly, embarrassed. I'm not usually like this. You're human, he said softly. That's enough. She looked at him then, really looked, and realized she had no idea who he was beyond what she'd seen inside these walls. A calm officer. A patient man. A steady presence. But she could sense something deeper beneath the surface, something unspoken in the way he carried himself. Why are you being so kind to me? She asked quietly. He hesitated, and something flickered in his eyes, an unguarded moment Karen couldn't decipher. Because compassion isn't conditional, he said. The words were simple, but they rang with a truth she didn't yet understand. He walked her back to her mother's room after she composed herself. The hallway felt longer, heavier. When they reached the door, Karen paused, turning to him. Thank you, she said. For staying. For everything. Darius nodded, but there was a depth in his gaze she hadn't noticed before. As if he were holding a truth between them, waiting. Take care of yourself, he said gently. And don't keep this from your family too long. You'll need support. She nodded, touched the door handle, and slipped inside before her emotions betrayed her again. Her mother was awake, watching her with that knowing softness only mothers possess. You were gone a long time, she said. Karen's throat tightened. Just tests, she managed. Her mother studied her face, eyes narrowing with intuition. Something's wrong. Karen opened her mouth, but the words lodged in her chest. She sank into the chair, trying to steady her breath. They found something. With my kidneys. Her mother's face paled. Karen. It's early, she said quickly. They're doing more tests. They're not sure yet. Her mother reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. We'll face it together. Karen's eyes burned again. She nodded, unable to speak. But later that night, long after her mother fell asleep, Karen found herself wandering back toward the hospital entrance. She didn't know why, maybe for air, maybe for clarity, maybe for another glimpse of the one person who felt steady in a world suddenly tilting. She saw him standing near the security desk, speaking quietly into his radio. Then she heard a nurse nearby, speaking in hushed tones to another staff member. Can you believe it? Officer Cole is still doing full shifts after what he went through last year. What was it again? The other asked. A major surgery. Kidney donation. He saved someone's life. Karen froze. Her heart stopped. Everything inside her went utterly, impossibly silent. A kidney donor. Her pulse hammered. Her vision blurred. And then, the truth began to creep in, not fully formed, not spoken aloud, but rising with the certainty of a storm breaking open the sky. She looked at Darius Cole, and for the first time, she felt the terrifying weight of fate tightening around her like a closing fist. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in slowly, like a rising tide creeping over the edges of a quiet shore, claiming ground grain by grain until the familiar landscape disappeared beneath it. Karen stood frozen in the corridor, the nurse's words echoing through her skull. Major surgery. Kidney donation. Saved someone's life. She felt the air tilt, her breath thin and sharp. Her gaze locked on Officer Darius Cole, who stood a few feet away, unaware that the ground beneath her world had begun to split open. She couldn't move. Couldn't blink. Couldn't breathe. The whisper of fate tightened around her chest until she finally forced herself to step forward, her legs stiff, fragile, as though they belonged to someone else. Darius turned at the sound of her footsteps. His expression softened the moment he saw her, but something flickered beneath the calm veneer, something he already knew. "Karen," he asked gently, "you all right?" She opened her mouth, but no words came. The truth trembled inside her, unspoken and tremor-raw. She swallowed hard, meeting his eyes. "I overheard the nurses. They said, you donated a kidney. Last year." Darius didn't flinch. His breath slipped out slowly, knowingly. "I did." Her pulse pounded against her ribs. Who was it for?" He hesitated. A quiet, painful pause. Then, someone who needed it. The answer wasn't enough. She stepped closer, heart pounding. "Please don't do that. Don't protect me from something I need to know." He looked at her then, really looked. Not as the frightened woman who'd slapped him, not as the apologetic daughter, but as someone standing at the brink of a truth she couldn't step back from. He exhaled. The recipient was anonymous. Legally. But the doctors contacted me afterward, told me the surgery was successful. That's all. She shook her head. Something inside her clawed upward, desperate. But what if? "Karen," he said softly, "you don't know that it was you." Her voice trembled. "But it could have been. I had tests years ago, markers. My doctor said my kidney function recovered, but they never figured out why. What if I was the one?" Darius's jaw tightened, a shadow crossing his face. "I didn't donate expecting to know. Or expecting anything at all." She stared at him, a realization dawning with slow, devastating clarity. This man, this calm, steady, patient man, had given someone life. Given someone a second chance. And she had struck him across the face without knowing she had once carried a piece of him inside her. A small, broken sound escaped her. He stepped forward instinctively. "Hey, breathe. Sit down." She sank onto a bench against the wall, her vision shimmering. He knelt in front of her, lowering himself to her eye level. "You're spiraling," he said gently. "Slow down." She pressed trembling fingers to her forehead. "I'm not spiraling. I'm finally seeing. I'm finally understanding what I did. What I might have done." "And what is that?" he asked quietly. "I hurt the man who might have saved my life," she whispered. He shook his head. "Karen." "No," she said, tears slipping free. "Don't take that away from me. If it's true, I need to face it. If it's not true, I still need to face who I was. What I became in that hallway." Darius didn't speak for a moment. The corridor hummed softly around them, the low buzz of fluorescent lights bearing silent witness. Finally, he spoke. "The truth is, I suspected." Her breath caught. "You, what?" "The timing," he said. "The hospital records. The way the doctors talked around certain details. They couldn't tell me your identity. But I did the math. When you came in with your mother, when I saw your name, I thought maybe. But it wasn't my place to say." Her heart clenched, a painful swell of guilt and awe. "Why didn't you tell me?" He looked down briefly, then back up. "Because you didn't owe me anything. Because saving someone isn't a debt. It's a choice. And if I did save you, then that's something I made peace with long before I knew your name." Her tears blurred him into soft edges. "I don't deserve that kind of grace." "Maybe not," he said. "But grace isn't given to people who deserve it. It's given because someone chooses to give it." She bowed her head, shoulders trembling. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "For everything. For who I was. For what I did to you. If you knew then that I might be the one you saved, why weren't you angry?" He smiled faintly. "Because your worst moment wasn't bigger than my best choice." The words hit her like a quiet revelation, a soft, devastating redemption. She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. I want to be better. I want to be someone who would deserve what you gave. If it was me. It was you, he said. The world stilled. I asked the doctors again after you apologized, he continued. I told them I felt there was something unfinished. They couldn't tell me directly. But a social worker confirmed your surgery date matched the case. They told me anonymously that the donor and recipient had crossed paths without realizing it. Karen covered her mouth, overcome by the truth finally spoken. A sob broke through her, raw and cracked. Why didn't you tell me then? Because you weren't ready to hear it, he said. And because I wanted you to heal on your own terms, not out of guilt. Her tears fell freely now. Darius reached out, not touching her yet, waiting for permission. Karen took his hand, gripping it tightly. Thank you, she whispered, voice trembling. For my life. For your patience. For seeing something in me I couldn't. He squeezed her hand gently. Just promise me one thing. She nodded. Anything. Live, he said simply. Live a life worthy of the second chance you got. That's all I'd ever want. She nodded, tears falling. I will. He stood slowly, helping her to her feet. They walked back toward her mother's room in silence, not the silence of distance, but the silence of two lives finally aligned in truth. When Karen entered the room, she paused at the doorway, looking back at him one last time. Darius. Yeah. I won't forget this. I won't forget you. He gave her a soft smile. Just live, Karen. That's enough. She stepped inside. The door closed gently behind her. And in the quiet that followed, she understood at last. Sometimes the person we hurt most deeply is the very one fate chose to save us. And sometimes redemption isn't found in forgiveness, but in what we choose to do with the life we've been given.